welcome to the book that makes a big step in the world of warriors. Sure, Midnight might have started a new story arc and introduced multiple point-of-view characters, but this book expands the world itself. Prior to Moonrise, the only organized group of cats outside the clans was Blood Clan, who, by their name and proximity to the forest, was implied to already be an offshoot off of, or even a parody of, the clans. This new group, the Tribe of Rushing Water, is entirely independent and shows that the clans are not the only way for cats to live together. So, with no other judgments based on knowledge of the future, let's explore this book. Moonrise came out on August 1st of 2005, a little less than 3 months after Midnight's release. This is already a startlingly short turnaround time, but it's even more impressive considering that both Midnight and Moonrise were written by Cherith Baldry. She probably would have had to write both books at once for the time between releases to be that short. Another fun note is that around the time of this book's release, the first version of the Warriors website came out. Thanks to the death of Flash, it isn't available to look at anymore, but it was pretty bare bones, with just a few character profiles from the first arc, into the wild allegiances for each of the 4 clans, a map of the forest territories, author profiles for Kane and Cherith, and advertisements for both existing arcs. Still, even this was a sign that Warriors was being taken seriously as a more long-lasting series, rather than one that would be forgotten only a year or 2 after it finished publishing. They had the go-ahead to keep producing these books, so let's see what they did with that freedom, beginning, as always, with the allegiances. ThunderClan now has 12 warriors instead of 11, and 5 apprentices instead of 6 since Sorreltail was promoted at the beginning of Midnight. And that's it. That is literally the only change across any of the clans, or even outside them. Okay, well, that was ridiculously short. I guess we can just say this time that the statistics in this book was an improvement even on the last book, with 46% of the characters being she-cats making up 48% of the lines, and miraculously only 68% of the lines going to the top 10 characters, with a significantly larger and genuinely important cast between the new tribe cats and the important players back in the clans. In a first for the series, the top 10 characters don't manage to cover every cat with more than 50 lines, and some really important characters like Stoneteller, Tawny Pelt, Hawkfrost, Talon of Swooping Eagle, and Brook Where Small Fish Swim were all left out of the top 10 count. And one final interesting detail is that Brambleclaw does not have the most lines this time around. Both Leafpaw and Stormfur, the 2 main point-of-view characters for this book, beat him. Feathertail falls short of his line count by quite a bit, but since she only gets 2 chapters to herself in this book, it's understandable. Now, let's get into the story. We begin with a prologue within a strange new society, the Tribe of Rushing Water. Their leader, Stoneteller, shares with his tribe a promise from the Tribe of Endless Hunting, their equivalent of StarClan, that says a silver cat will come from outside the tribe to save them from something known as Sharptooth. Stoneteller assigns he/him pronouns to the cat whose fur he saw in the water, but it is at this point unclear if that was an assumption or something the Tribe of Endless Hunting shared with him. We then move to catch up with Midnight and the traveling cats. Stormfur cares about Feathertail. Feathertail cares about Crowpaw. Stormfur is dismayed and mildly annoyed by this and wonders how she could consider a half-clan relationship after what happened to their parents, and then proceeds to justify his own practically identical crush on Squirrelpaw. Back in the forest, Leafpaw and Sorreltail are being friends, and ThunderClan is learning that the Two Legs are tearing up the forest, something that they are understandably terrified of. Midnight saves the traveling cats, plus Purdy, from some foxes by talking them down, and directs the group to go home through the mountains instead of the Two-Leg place. Despite Purdy's objections, the group decides to go with Midnight's suggestion and head for the hills. Leafpaw, Greystripe, and Firestar go to check how ShadowClan is handling the Two-Leg invasion, but Blackstar is defensive and refuses to see a long-term problem, sending them away and increasing border patrols. Leafpaw then sneaks off to Windclane with Sorreltail to speak with Tallstar, but they are attacked and driven away before they have a chance to, and saved by the ever-beautiful Mothwing. Sorreltail comments that Mothwing isn't following the code properly, possibly because her mother is a rogue, and Leafpaw gets upset with her. Mothwing does let them know that RiverClan hasn't seen the monsters at all, although they have caught wind of Windclan's fear. Stormfur, immediately after admiring Squirrelpaw, tries to confront Feathertail about Crowpaw and is shot down. Leafpaw goes on a date with Mothwing and meets Hawkfrost, who doesn't seem to mind the idea of imitating Tigerstar or arguing with his sister. Leafpaw at this point gets an inkling, based on his similar appearance to Brambleclaw, that Tigerstar is their father. Over in the mountains, the group meets their first tribe cats, Brook Where Small Fish Swim and Crag Where Eagles Nest, who take them to the Tribe of Rushing Water to meet Teller of the Pointed Stones. That is also probably the last time I will use any of their full names, because goodness, those become a mouthful with any more than one. Leafpaw and Cinderpelt share a sweet bonding moment after she is scolded for meeting Mothwing, and then we're back to the tribe. Stoneteller explains that he is the healer, essentially both the tribe's leader and medicine cat, and everyone starts crowding around Stormfur, calling him the One. The tribe has many different terms for things, 2Bs for apprentices for example, and a couple different customs like sharing food bite by bite and separating into cave guards and prey hunters. But on the whole, they aren't that different from the clans, other than being entirely alone with no other groups of cats around. Firestar and Cinderpelt ease the tension between ThunderClan and WindClan, and the traveling cats debate how long they should stay with the tribe, given Tawnypelt's still injured shoulder, and Stormfur starts to get acquainted with Brook. They all go out hunting together, learning to hunt eagles like the tribe cats do, and then Stormfur gets irrational and angry at his sister for talking with Crowpaw instead of him. They also try to leave the mountains and are stopped. Stoneteller explains the prophecy to them and declares that Stormfur will save them from Sharptooth, a mountain lion that has been attacking the tribe. The other traveling cats are taken prisoner and then thrown out of the tribe. After a medicine cat gathering, we get a couple of Feathertail point of view chapters where the remaining traveling cats plot Stormfur's escape, and then Feathertail teaches Crowpaw to fish. As they get ready to save Stormfur, though, they notice Sharptooth barging into the tribe's waterfall camp. They attack and manage to help Stormfur and themselves get out in the chaos. Meanwhile, rabbits are poisoned, so ThunderClan has to throw all of them out, and Leafpaw saves Reedpaw of RiverClan with Spotted Leaf's help, after Mothwing stumbles and Hawkfrost shoves her aside. And while she was gone, Cloudtail and Brightheart disappeared, and Dappletail died, with Larchkit following soon after. The traveling group, now out of the cave, meet Talon, Rock, and Bird, 3 outcast tribe cats who were sent to go kill Sharptooth. Their other 3 companions died, and without Sharptooth's pelt, the living 3 cats weren't allowed to return. Stormfur talks with Talon about how he thinks he might be meant to fulfill the tribe's prophecy, since he wasn't part of the 4 cats chosen by StarClan for this journey. Silverstream visits him in his sleep and basically tells him he's right. With Stormfur's resolve, the traveling cats and outcasts band together to go back and defeat Sharptooth by feeding him poisoned prey. Mothwing defends Sorreltail to Hawkfrost when Leafpaw says she didn't mean to cross their border, and we get more fun opinions from Hawkfrost about how Mistyfoot is a coward and he should be deputy instead. Mothwing explains that, like some of the ThunderClan cats, Mistyfoot has been missing for a day. It is then confirmed by Mothwing that Tigerstar is her father. During the preparations to feed Sharptooth the deathberries, he shows up unexpectedly and the battle begins early. Feathertail realizes it is her job to defeat Sharptooth, and hurls herself onto a stalactite which falls and kills Sharptooth, along with herself. Stormfur and Crowpaw say their last goodbyes, and the tribe celebrates as Stormfur wishes it had been him who fulfilled the prophecy instead. Sorreltail and Leafpaw figure out that the disappearing cats were taken by Two Legs, and Leafpaw gets captured along with them. The traveling cats leave the tribe and see Highstones, realizing they are almost home. Leafpaw gets a much more sizable portion of the book compared to Midnight, with almost every other chapter given to her. In addition, actually important things are happening back in the clans that we need to see. The tensions as every clan tries to stay strong against the invading Two Legs, the disappearances and deaths of cats in every clan, and of course the relationship between and backstory of Mothwing and Hawkfrost in RiverClan. It probably could have been more direct if we had Mothwing's point of view instead of hers, to actually see the deputyship and sibling tensions firsthand, but Leafpaw does the job. This phenomenon, however, does cause a bit of whiplash as you read the book. Jumping from tense conflicts in the forest to tense conflicts in the mountains can lead some details from one plot or the other to be forgotten while reading the intermittent chapters, something that was never a problem in the first arc. I do actually prefer this style of series writing in general, since it gives a variety in the characters we have to follow, but it isn't without its drawbacks. We have a Stormfur point of view! Feathertail too, but not for long enough to matter, unfortunately. This should be a big deal, as it's the first point of view in the series from a non-ThunderClan cat, but there are a couple of issues with it. First is that the whole of his point of view takes place outside RiverClan, so we don't get the benefits of a different clan's point of view. He doesn't mention any other friends or enemies he left back in RiverClan either, so no new information is gained. Second, he doesn't think much about his home either. Most of his attention is on the traveling group, Feathertail and Squirrelpaw in particular, and then the tribe and Brook. And third, Stormfur in particular is just a really bad character to show what's great about RiverClan. The few times he does think about the clan he left behind, it's just to say that he and his sister felt isolated from them thanks to what TigerClan did to them, and he's glad to be with the traveling cats instead. Within the first chapter, we have Stormfur mentioning how the 6 cats have become a unified force rather than a group of squabbling rivals. There are 2 issues with this statement. First, as I mentioned in the last episode, the group hasn't really bonded that much. They didn't go through any formative experiences, share much about themselves, or stick their necks out for each other in any way that would advance their relationships. The closest we had was Feathertail and Crowpaw, who did, and do, clearly have feelings for each other and grew closer, but all of it off-screen, away from the point-of-view characters. And of course, after this book, Feathertail's death stops that relationship from being good progress for the mission as a whole. Second, and perhaps more importantly, they were never really a group of squabbling rivals. Crowpaw was grumpy, standoffish, and didn't like taking stupid orders, but otherwise every cat in the group got along just fine immediately. Brambleclaw already knew his sister, Squirrelpaw, and even Feathertail and Stormfur pretty well, and didn't gain any new insight into any of them, save perhaps for finding Squirrelpaw minutely less annoying than before. This is one case where I think having a full group of apprentices as the main characters could have been a benefit, as they wouldn't have had time to get to know each other at gatherings or across borders yet, and could truly bond while on the journey. Even if you went with this exact cast, though, there were feelings that could have been explored past the ability to be polite with each other, like Tawny and Bramble's individual feelings about their father and what happened since she left, Stormfur and Feathertail admitting to their distance from their clan after RiverClan agreed to murder them under Tigerstar's orders, Crowpaw and Squirrelpaw not feeling respected among their peers despite having good ideas. There were lots of routes they could have gone, but instead what we have is 6 cats who could previously stand to be around each other, and now, after a long journey, can still stand to be around each other. Yay! Now for a few miscellaneous things. Cinderpelt and Little Cloud are still shown to have a history together after she nursed him back to health, so even when Blackstar is on the aggressive with ThunderClan, Little Cloud speaks out in their favor. Firestar keeps having to hold Greystripe back from making aggressive comments or flat-out attacking during tenuous diplomatic missions, proving even more so that he really shouldn't have been chosen as deputy. Brambleclaw and Stormfur are both commenting on Squirrelpaw's impressive abilities and spunk in this book, though they never got into an outright argument over who should have her or some nonsense like that. The sheer number of apprentice warrior romances in this book is astounding, and a little bit creepy. Based on the Dustfern romance in the first arc, it's quite possible that the Errands hadn't yet determined the exact age of consent equivalence in the universe at this point, but looking back at Brambleclaw and Stormfur fawning over Squirrelpaw, Feathertail for Crowpaw, and even Mothwing and Leafpaw, it's a little uncomfortable. Though in the case of Leafpaw and Mothwing, it's more understandable given that we have the perspective of the apprentice with a crush rather than a warrior crushing on an apprentice. On the structural and character levels, Moonrise is a surprisingly good book, especially by New Prophecy standards. It is held back if you don't like the characters they give you to work with, which I personally do not, and there are ways it could have been made better, but for the most part it is a solid entry in the series, amping up the tension in both the traveling group and the forest clans, setting up a RiverClan power struggle, and killing off an important character while leaving character drama behind for both Stormfur and Crowpaw. The biggest knock is, of course, the tribe, which, of course, is a massive problem considering about a third to half of the book, and the main emotional conflict is devoted solely to them. None of the tribe's characters get much development on their own, and not a ton separated the two groups from each other. This is also the beginning of both a massive dependence on the clans for survival and a massive aggression towards not only the clans, but each other, making them seem uncivilized and putting the clans on a moral high ground in a way that absolutely shouldn't have been done, especially if, as it will be, this image is repeated throughout the series. But I've said my piece on the tribe already, and we're leaving them behind for now. We'll see what happens when the traveling group finally returns home in the next book of our trip through time.